So in this video, I'm gonna talk about the experience that I've had with depression in the past. And on this channel, I talk about mental health in different ways, in different capacities. And I feel like it's only right that I'm also vulnerable and I share my experience with mental health struggles as well. Because I'm not an expert in preventing mental health and I'm human just as much as anybody else and have my highs and I have my lows. So in this video, I'll just be sharing kind of what I've been through and what it was like for me. And there's nothing that you have to take or learn from this. This is just me sharing my experience. And if you want to share your experience in the comment section, feel free to. Feel like it'll be a nice conversation to have, just being open and vulnerable about our experiences as people. So I hope that this might help somebody, whether you're going through it or you've gone through it. I hope that this video helps you in some way. So I remember the first time I ever experienced depression. I think I was about 14 or 15, and I was in year 10 of secondary school. So at the time, I would have been writing like my GCSEs. And honestly, I don't remember how it started or what triggered it. But all I know is it was a lot to do with me feeling left out and me not feeling loved by anybody and me not feeling like anybody cared about me or wanted me around. And this was something I felt a lot in the friendship group that I had at the time. I always felt like the outsider. And I remember just kind of feeling like, yeah, nobody wanted me around and nobody cared about me that much or cared about me at all, really. I don't really know where it started and how it started, but that was kind of the main thing that I remember that I was feeling at the time. And if I remember correctly, I think it lasted about maybe a year or just under a year. And it was quite interesting and weird because I think it was what I now understand is high functioning depression, in the sense that I would go to school and I would be so okay and I would be fine and I'd do my schoolwork, my grades or anything didn't reflect that I was going through depression. And I was still able to kind of hang out and enjoy the company of my friends and laugh and have banter. And that would be at school and I'd be okay whenever I was with my friends on the weekends. But the weirdest thing that I remember is like whenever I'd come home from school, it would be like the cloud of depression would just like settle over me the moment I walked in the front door and the moment I went to my room. It's like the depression was like waiting for me at the door. It was so strange because outside at school, like it wouldn't even be like on my mind. I wouldn't even feel the depression. And maybe it was just in the back of my mind somewhere. But in that regard, it is what I now know as high functioning depression or highly functional depression. And at the time as well, I didn't know about mental health issues. I didn't know about like anxiety or depression or anything like that. I was only like 14 or 15 at the time, so I didn't know much of this. I didn't know anything about it. And I remember just for months on end feeling more and more isolated and like nobody loved me and nobody cared about me. And it went on and on for a while and it got worse and worse gradually. And like I said, it was always when I was at home, when I was in the four walls of my bedroom by myself, like the negative thoughts just continued to grow and grow and grow. And I can't remember the order stuff started in, but I remember at some point, like fantasizing about how I would die when I would die. It became like a normal thought of my thought process. It became a normal part of my thought process. Like I wouldn't like I remember vividly one time when I was in having a bath and I remember just thinking like if only I could just like drown in this bathtub and just like be done and just leave Earth. And a lot of the time like I would just fantasize about like being hit by a car or just something that I wouldn't have to inflict on myself, but something that could just happen to me. And it was just like a constant thought process of like, okay, I like it was just like a fantasy of like how I was gonna die, and my mind would come up with all these different ways and scenarios. So yeah, it became like a normal part of my thought process. And at some point, it got really, really dark. It got really, really bad. And I remember at some point I almost kind of started self harming. I started superficially self harming. So I remember, I think at this time I was still 15, roughly. I started superficially self harming. I remember the first time that I did, it was like, I think I was struggling to sleep because I remember it was really late. It was dark, like everyone was asleep in the house. And I went to the window, looked outside. My bedroom was downstairs. So I looked outside the window, it was dark, and I was just standing there, like waiting for, and I was hoping for sleep to come. And just the worst kind of thoughts were going through my mind. And then I remember I got a scissors and I started like pinching my skin with it, like pressing it into my skin and just like scratching myself with it, but not to the point, but there was nothing to show for the scratching. Like you couldn't see the scratches, but the feel of the pressure on my skin is what I was doing. So I started doing that and just pressing my skin more and more. There's no scars or any residue of any scratches. I didn't go that deep. That's why I'm saying it was quite superficial for me anyway, because I didn't go further. I didn't ever make myself bleed. I didn't ever like cut myself or anything or create any wounds on my skin. I didn't get there, but I imagine if it had carried on for much longer, I would have eventually got there. So this became like a pattern, and I kind of started doing it more and more, like just pressing like a sharp scissors into my skin, pushing it down, and it felt good at the time because it just does. I think people who are self-harmed or know how self-harm works, it's something, it helps you to feel something. People do it so they can feel something, and at the time I had no clue why I wanted to do it and why I was doing it, but it was something that felt good at the time. So putting together the thoughts of fantasizing about dying and also then piercing my skin and superficially self-harming became like a normal part of my routine. In the evenings or at night when I couldn't sleep because of the depression, I would, find a way to hurt my skin and to put pressure on my skin, pinch myself with the scissors. And it was a really, really dark time, and it doesn't end there. At some point I was so sure and I was so like determined to end, like, and to die, that at some point I ended up writing a suicide letter for people that I wanted to address, people that had made me feel like I wasn't loved, people that had contributed in my mind to me not feeling important, to not feeling loved, people that had said something or done something to me that had made me feel the way I felt. And I wrote that letter to, like, I don't know, like maybe 6 people or something like that. And most of these people were friends, and I think I probably wrote to my parents like it wasn't their fault, and there was nothing they could have done, and blah blah blah. And yeah, it was a letter that I'd written, and I was so ready, and I think I kept it somewhere in my room, or I can't remember if I kept it on me. But that was like the next stage. I was like, a part of me was so sure that like I'm gonna die at some point, like I need to, I want to, I have to. And it was a really dark time. And I think even though I didn't know what was going on with me, and I didn't know why I was feeling, I didn't know what I was feeling was called depression, I just knew that I don't want to be here, I don't want to be alive. And it went on for so many months, and I felt like there was nothing else like for me to live for. Because in my mind I was so convinced like nobody loves me, nobody cares about me, and it was like my theme tune, like nobody cares, nobody wants me around. Even if I go, if people treat me like the way they treat me now, of course they don't care, they won't miss me. And of course to an extent I knew my parents would miss me, and my parents love me and they care about me and they still do. But the thing about depression is like all common sense and logic like goes out of the window because the feelings are so overwhelming and so strong. So it definitely became something that I think a part of me was scared of how I was feeling. Like I was scared of my own feelings. I was so scared of the fact that I was like wanting to die. And it's like I was kind of, there was still a part of me that was like conscious, like this is not really real, like this is not what you want. And I think that that part of me that was scared of how I was feeling is the part that then eventually reached out for help. So I reached out for help to a pastor in my church, and I started speaking to her. And I remember I went to her office. I can't even remember how I managed to get in contact with her in the first place. Actually, no, I do remember. So she was already in my life. So I reached out to her and I messaged her. I think I can't remember how the conversation went, but I know that we met in her office, and she kind of just asked, like, what's going on. And I can't believe I even had the courage to tell her what was going on. I told her a lot of things about what I was going through. I told her about the fact that I was fantasizing about dying. I can't remember if I told her about the superficial self harm, but I maybe probably did mention it. And I also told her about the letter. I didn't show her the letter, but I told her about it, and she told me to destroy it. And she gave me some Bible verses to take home with me. And I remember she messaged me, and we would text every single day. We didn't speak on the phone every day, but we texted every single day. She was checking in, praying for me. I believe she was probably praying for me because I wasn't really in a headspace to pray for myself. But I do believe she was probably praying for me a lot. I didn't see her many times after that, but we stayed in contact for many months. And her being there was the most unexpected thing, but it really, really made a big difference knowing that there was one person that cared. Like, of course, like I said, I know my parents care and I know my family cares, but in depression, sometimes it's not really about that. And it was just the way that she literally every day for months on end, she checked in every single day. And I think it was only because of her intervention at the time that I was able to feel better. And I kid you not, a few months later, I was so excited about life. I was so excited about my future, going into year 11 and going to sixth form and making new friends. And the thought that I had been depressed and hated life and was looking forward to dying was so foreign that it shocked me that I was like, that was me. Like, why did I even want to? And I know this is not the same for everybody. This is just my experience. So I'm grateful that there was that one person who was there when I was at the lowest low. Um, so that's not the reason why I became a counselor as well, by the way. But for me, I think it did play a part in me choosing this career path in the future when I did. I didn't know about counseling or therapy at the time. So that's why I probably didn't even reach out to any professionals because I didn't know about it at the time. But I'm so grateful that I had her in my corner to remind me that I am important, that I'm loved, and that somebody cares for me. And I can't ever like judge somebody for self-harming. People that sometimes often think self-harming is doesn't make any sense. Why would someone cut themselves? It's not something I can judge because I understand it. Even if I never made myself bleed or anything, I understand that there's some kind of impulse, a feeling that is strong within the person and within the mind that is hard to comprehend and to even make sense of. So that was my first experience of depression. Unfortunately, there's a few more. So the second time that I had depression was when I was in my second year of uni, and I believe at the time I must have been 19. I was not far from turning 20. I was a few months away from turning 20. This one is, it was depression, but it was more so suicidal thoughts than it was depression because there was something that I had gone through at the time, and I'm not going to disclose that here because it's very personal. There was something I had gone through at the time, and I remember it kind of was quite sudden, the feeling and the thought process and the thought patterns that came with it. I remember I came back from a lecture, and I came to my room, and I got in my bed, and and the thought just occurred to me like I can't be here. I don't want to be here. Like if I'm gonna keep feeling like this, I don't want to be here. Like, and it was it was quite sudden and unexpected feeling. So that's why I say like the suicidal thoughts came before I even registered that there was any feelings of depression. I knew that I wasn't at my best self, and I knew I wasn't happy at the time, and I knew I was feeling low, but I didn't expect suicidal thoughts to then suddenly be a part of it. It was understandable why I was feeling low and sad at the time, but the suicidal thoughts was the part that I didn't expect, and it all came on me quite suddenly. And I was like, well, I know I don't want to really die. I don't really want to leave the earth, but this is also too much for me. All these negative feelings are way, way too much for me. And I remember just taking like I can't remember. I know that I took some paracetamols. I wanted to overdose myself because I wanted to just black out for a few hours. And I can't remember exactly how many I took, but it wasn't more than four. But it was more than, so it might have been like three or two and a half. And at the time, I didn't look up how many pills to overdose because I didn't. A part of me was still fighting it, like don't do that. Just take enough that you can black out for a few hours. And I remember I called somebody and they kind of knew or sensed that something was wrong. So they came to see me and they found me in a they found me somewhat like half asleep or half conscious. And it was the weirdest experience I ever had in in general. I it felt like my body was frozen. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move, but I could hear everything around me. So it's like I was trying to seep into unconsciousness, but I was still quite conscious. My body was asleep, but my mind was awake, and it was really, really frustrating because the person was trying to talk to me and ask me, like, I remember they were trying to talk to me, and I was trying to respond, and I couldn't, and I just couldn't like open my mouth. I couldn't move. I couldn't. So I was trying to make sounds so that they could like comprehend anything, so I could try and answer like the yes or no questions with some kind of response. And I don't know if it was because of the pills I took. It was just paracetamol, but I took more than the recommended amount. I don't know if it was psychological, that fact that I couldn't speak or move my body, but I could hear everything going on around me, or if it was an effect, a side effect of the amount of pills I took. And this person got so worried that I wasn't responding, or at least I was trying to respond, but it wasn't like enough. I couldn't open my eyes either, by the way. So they called the ambulance service. The ambulance service came, and I was trying to push myself out of it to talk and to respond as much as I could. So they did what they could, like physical obs, and they were like, trying to get me to speak, and I was just kind of making sounds. And then at some point, I kept pushing myself. At some point, I was eventually able to speak, and I spoke, and then I started crying, and the person I was with me spoke to them, and then eventually they left. But I remember when the paramedics were there, side note, when the paramedics were there, they were so unprofessional. They made fun of me, and they were saying some things about how I was seeking attention, and that I wasn't serious or that I didn't really need help. And they didn't know that I could hear everything because I wasn't physically able to respond and speak at the time when they first came. So they were making fun of me. And even the person that was kind of meant to be there for me was kind of subtly agreeing with them. Um, and it really upset me because even in that moment, I still couldn't even like respond and say like shut up or why would you say that? Couldn't even defend myself. And I just remember feeling like that was just so insensitive, so insensitive. That like one significant moment. And I think after following that, I definitely was in a low place mentally. The suicidal thoughts didn't remain. It was very, very surprising and shocking and sudden for me. And once again, around that time, I also had to start preparing for my exams. So I think even though I was still depressed following that incident, the highly functional depression came back because I had to go to the library, I had to prepare for my exams, and I had to just revise day and night. So I don't think I was even able to process the depression I was feeling because I was always in my books and I was always in the library. And then in the evenings, I'd come home and be sad again. So it's quite similar to kind of what I'd experienced the first time I had depression. And the last time I experienced depression wasn't that long ago. It was during the second year of my master's. Um, it was at the start of the second year. I wasn't sure if I was going to make it, and there was a lot of financial pressure on myself. And also, there was issues with like accommodation, and I just didn't know what to do. And I felt like I was stuck between a rock and a hard place for such a long time. And honestly, it was it was difficult because the first few months of university that year, I had to commute from Birmingham to London I think it was every Friday. So I'd wake up at like 4 a.m., be ready, leave my house around 6, so I could get the train. I could get to the train station for like 7, and get to London by around 9. and then get to the university for 10. That was the first part of the day, started at 10. And I remember every time I was making a journey to uni, I was always sad, I was always upset, I was always crying. Well, I wasn't crying, I was trying to hold back tears because I was wearing makeup and I was also on the train. Even if I wasn't wearing makeup, the fact that I was on the train with lots of other people going to work and stuff, I didn't let the tears fall, so to say. Every journey was just really difficult. And by the time I'd got to uni, it would be like I'd have to spend the whole day building up my spirits. But by the time the day finished, I would remember, like, okay, now I have to make that same journey home. So it was like 5 hour journey home. So by the time uni finished at 5, others would probably be home by like 6 or 7. I'd get home to Birmingham at 10 p.m. Like, it was horrible. And on the journey home, it was the same thing. I would I would be just sad on the train on the way home. I would be so sad. But at the time, I was in a relationship, so my ex at the time would make sure that he would take me to the train station after uni because he knew, like, I was really struggling and I wasn't at my best state of mind. Like, there was so much going on in the background that was making things worse every single day. It was like there was more bad news, something, another obstacle, another problem, and I was already in a bad place. So all the bad news just made it harder for me to even try and stay positive. So his way of supporting, and which was really helpful, was after uni he would take me to the train station. We'd sometimes get food, and then I'd be on my way home. And then there was one really unfortunate day where he couldn't take me to the train station because he had somewhere to be, which I understood he had told me in advance. Like, it wasn't like a last minute thing. It was something that we had spoken about and I knew. But what I didn't know was how much it was going to impact me that day. So from uni, I made my way home by myself. I made my way to Euston Station by myself. And by the time I got on the train to Euston and I was on my train home to Birmingham, tears, just depression all over again. The whole journey was just me fighting tears most of the time. And by the time I'd got home, it was, 10 p.m. as usual. I remember getting home, getting into bed, and I remember just praying and hoping that I wouldn't wake up the next day. And I didn't take anything this time, but I just hoped that I wouldn't. I just hoped that I wouldn't wake up the next day. That was, I don't even know if it was a prayer, but it was something I had a strong hope for. I was just like so sure. I was like, okay, tomorrow I don't want to wake up. Like, let this be it. I can't do this anymore. It's too much. And of course, the next day I woke up and I told my boyfriend at the time, like, what had happened the night before. And he was, really shocked and he was really surprised. And he felt bad that he couldn't have been there. But it wasn't his fault because I didn't even know that I would feel that way. I didn't realize I would feel suicidal that night. I didn't realize it would be such a strong feeling. And after that, the depression remained around. It still stayed for another like few months, while I was getting into the swing of things and trying to carry on my second year in the best way I could. Things definitely did get better after a while. But spiritually, I wasn't in the best place as well. Mentally, I wasn't in the best place. Financially, I wasn't in the best place. Like, everything just felt so difficult. And then academically as well, I was just not at my best because I had so much going on outside of uni. So when I say that this master's degree was really difficult for me, it was really difficult because all the financial pressure that I felt throughout the 2, 3 years, especially the first 2 years, made it so that, there are people sometimes who will die by suicide because of bills, because of money, because of financial blackmail. And it's a real thing. Financial pressure can lead to people to just be like, I can't do this anymore. And it's something that, once again, like I say, I can't judge because I understand, I've been through it. And you might think, well, it's just money, like, why would someone want to die over that? And it's hard to explain because when feelings take over and logic goes out of the window, there's not much explanation besides that's how you felt. And that's not something I think any of us should judge anybody for because we've all acted on strong feelings before. But that was my last experience of depression. And it was really difficult. But I'm so glad I had somebody there at the time who was able to support me through it. And even though it didn't go away just like that, it did go away. So those are my experiences with depression. And one thing I've learned about myself is that I'm a very resilient somebody, very. And as much as people might think because I'm a therapist and I'm a counselor that, I should be able to just be okay, that's not the case. As much as any other person, I go through things and they will impact me. Yes, I have more tools and more understanding of how it works, but that doesn't mean life is still not going to happen to me. But one thing about myself that I've learned is that I'm resilient and that even when depression happens, I'll be okay. And the thing is, even if I ever get depressed again, I know that I'll be fine. If I ever feel suicidal again, I hope I'll also still be fine, because life happens and it's so unpredictable. Because in all of these three experiences, not one of them was I able to predict that this is how I was going to feel, this is what was going to happen. Kind of just came on and life happened. But I'm grateful for the people that were there at the time to get me through and to support me. And I'm just grateful that I'm still here and I'm looking forward to the future still. And this has been a really difficult journey, but I'm just gonna end this video with a poem which was written originally by a lady called Janae. It became a trend on TikTok where you write about a time that you met your younger self. And it's actually quite therapeutic. So I'm gonna end with that and I'll see you guys in the next video. Calling you to say